Hi, it's Scott here from MoneyNerd, and I help people beat debt collectors and become debt free. In this quick video, I'm going to show you how to deal with CRS debt collectors, also known as credit resource solutions. You've probably received a letter from CRS or had them knocking at your door. When I had debt collectors chasing me back in 2010, it caused me a lot of stress and anxiety. But since then, I've worked in the credit card industry for over 10 years, and I'm happy to say that I've been able to use my insider knowledge to help out thousands of people. So, today, I'd like to share my knowledge by answering 5 most frequently asked questions, such as how do you reduce your repayment amounts? How do you stop CRS from contacting you? What happens if you ignore CRS? And what they're not allowed to do when they're collecting your debt. At the end of this video, I have a bonus tip on how to write off some of your debt, so stick around to the end. Okay, so question number 1. Are CRS, credit resource solutions, legitimate? Well, if you've received a letter in the post, this is probably your first question. If you don't recognize the name, it might be that they've purchased your debt or they're collecting on behalf of another company. Well, I can confirm that CRS is a UK registered company, and while there's a bunch of scams out there when it comes to debt collectors, I'm afraid this is unlikely to be a scam. However, you should never pay until you're absolutely certain that the debt is yours. You're well within your rights to ask CRS to provide proof that the debt is yours, and I have a free letter template for this on my website, which I'll link to in the description below. Okay, question number 2. What happens if you ignore CRS debt collectors? Well, if you ignore debt collectors, your problem could escalate and become very serious. CRS does have the right to take court action against you. If you were to ignore court letters, you could end up with a county court judgment or a CCJ, which could have a major impact on your credit score and your chances of borrowing money in the future. If you do get a CCJ and still don't pay, you could ultimately result in bailiffs coming to your home to take your valuable items or even your car. So please don't ignore them, and we'll get to what you should do instead later in this video. Question number 3. What CRS are not allowed to do? Right, so despite being legally appointed to collect your debts or outright owning your debt, there are several things CRS cannot do when it comes to collecting your debts. Knowing that CRS must uphold standards set out by the regulatory guidelines will make you feel a lot more comfortable and confident when dealing with them. So here's the things they're legally not allowed to do. They're legally not allowed to visit your place of work without you giving them specific permission to do so. Before this rule was in place, some debt collectors would show up while you're working to try and make things awkward for you, as a way of sort of pressuring you into paying. And on a similar note, they're not allowed to speak to neighbors, friends, or family about your debt. Again, this is to stop them trying to embarrass you or to shame you into paying your debt. CRS cannot contact you or visit your home at unreasonable times of the day. For phone calls, most people would agree that before 8 a.m. is too early and after 9 p.m. is too late, but your circumstances might be completely different. For example, if you work night shifts. If you can't take calls at certain times, then tell them. They should keep a record of this and avoid calling you at these times. And if they do call you at these times, then you can make a complaint and report them and get them into trouble. Okay, so they're not allowed to act in any threatening or intimidating way. And also they should not pressurize you into paying larger installments than you can afford or to hit deadlines that are impossible. The regulations also say that they're not allowed to pressure you into selling your house or to take out more credit to pay your debts. Debt collectors can't pretend to be bailiffs or enforcement agents. Unlike bailiffs, debt collectors can't force their way into your house or refuse to leave if you ask them to, and they're certainly not allowed to take any of your belongings or clamp your car. Okay, so question number 4. How long can you be chased for debt? Well, interesting question. Under the Limitations Act of 1980, A creditor or debt collector has 6 years to chase most unsecured unpaid debts, or 12 years for some mortgage debts. This limitation period starts from the time of your last payment and or very important, or when you at last acknowledge the debt. So it's important to think back to when you made your last payment, and think back to when you might have acknowledged that debt last. Did you do it in an email or a letter or a phone? Because that will impact whether there's any limitations on whether they can collect that debt. If a CCJ has already been registered against you, then it can be enforced at any point, and there's no limitation period for CCJ. Also, while we're on it, the Limitation Act doesn't apply to debts owed to the government, such as income tax, benefit overpayments, and council tax. So this means these types of debts can be collected even after 6 years has passed. Okay, last question, and then I have a bonus tip on how to potentially write off some of your debt. Question number 5, how do I pay less and come to an agreement with CRS debt collectors? Well, there's a number of ways you might be able to reduce the amount you pay. If you're struggling to meet the repayment amounts, there's several options that you could explore. If CRS are adding interest and charges to your debt, then you could ask them to freeze that interest and stop adding charges to allow you to get back on track quicker and clear those debts quicker. Debt collectors are more likely to stop and reduce interest and charges if you can prove that you have financial difficulties. I'd suggest you put together a budget which would include your income and your essential living costs, so you can clearly demonstrate that you have financial difficulties. Also, you can use that budget to negotiate reduced payments. Again, you'd need to show that you can't afford higher repayments, so use that budget to write down your income and essential living costs so you can demonstrate clearly what you can afford. Some debt collectors will only agree to reduce payments for a short amount of time, and then they'll want to review your updated situation. Other times they'll be more lenient and allow for much longer repayment periods. This will all depend on the nature of the debt and your individual circumstances. If you have the cash, you could make a full and final settlement offer. This is where you ask if they'll accept a lump sum instead of the full balance that you owe on your debt. And in return for that lump sum payment, some debt collectors will agree to write off the remainder of the debt. And as promised, my bonus tip on how you can write off some of your debt. And it's not just with CRS debt collectors, by the way. If you have debts with other people, there's lots of ways you can significantly reduce your payments and even write off some of your debts. During my career in the credit card industry, I gained a lot of insider knowledge, and as a result, I discovered there's 7 relatively unheard of debt solutions that are available in the UK. The industry doesn't advertise many of these, as most of them are either free or low cost, so there's no money to be made on them. Now, unfortunately, these solutions are not available for everybody. You do need to be in specific circumstances, but there's probably at least one of these solutions that you do qualify for. You could either pay less than you already do, or maybe even write off some of your debt. To make it simple, I've created a free eligibility checker, which I've linked to in the description below. It's 5 simple questions and takes less than 30 seconds. And you can find out if you can reduce your payments and write off some of your debt. So click the link in the description now and go and do that.